Look, I want to speak a little bit about Chelsea because they're facing, if what this expert says is true, coupled with the news around the investigation into them breaching FFP and payment regulations that they've reported themselves to the Premier League and UEFA for. I want to play this video very quickly for the viewers to see regarding their FFP situation, because it doesn't sound good. So it's about 2 minutes long, but take a little listen, people, and then we're going to delve into this in more detail.
Chelsea have spent, since Bowley and Igbali came in, Chelsea have spent something in the region of £1 billion. So how have they managed to get around FFP? That's what everybody's asking.
Yeah, well, look, they've used
Is there trouble on the horizon?
Tricks of amortization. In my mind, there's certainly trouble on the horizon, and they will certainly fail financial fair play for the current season, unless, it seems to me very unlikely, that by the 30th of June this year, they sell well over £100 million of players. But the window that they can now do that, now that the window is about to slam shut,
is close quietly anyway.
Close quietly this year.
Yes.
It's going to be very small because the season's going to finish and we've got the Euros. So if you look at someone like Gallagher's going to be in the Euros from the 14th of June. So if they want to ship Gallagher before the 30th of June, they've got to move very, very quickly. And again, the likely buyers are going to know that Chelsea need to sell players. This breach that Chelsea are lined up for is much bigger than Everton's breach. And most importantly, from an aggravating perspective, they will consider it deliberate. It won't be, they can't hide behind having built a stadium or inadvertently breach financial fair play. So if they breach, when it comes to the assessment of the sanction, and remember the way this works.
If they breach or when, now
well,
that
I
they've
think
breached.
they'll breach, but the period, the accounting period is not over yet. I mean, let's be fair to Chelsea. And, I have lots of people telling me, well, you just sell Conor Gallagher for 60 million, you sell Brozier for 40, you sell James for 30, or, whoever it is. People come up with this list of players that they can just sell. But there's no buyers. There's no money in the game at the moment outside of the Premier League. And the Premier League are not stupid. They're not going to bite on these crazy prices for players that they don't rate that highly, where they know that Chelsea are over barrel.
It's a very interesting take. They're in danger. They've got to raise, it's believed, they've got to raise somewhere in the region of £100 million by the end of June, which means maybe selling some players that they want to keep. They are running a risk of not only breaching FFP rules, but it's also stated here that their recent transfer activity could see them penalised even further, as they have potentially broken the Premier League sustainability and profit regulations, with the club not allowed to make a loss of any more than 105 million over a 3-year period, which they're set to definitely lose more than that. And there's very little of that those losses that have been spent on infrastructure, the women's game, youth players, and the academy. Chelsea were banking on getting back into the Champions League this year. There's no doubt about it, and raising 70, 80, 90 million pound more. And I know Chelsea fans say, well, this keeps being said about us. It's kind of nonsense. With the way the Premier League has demonstrated its teeth to Everton twice now, to Nottingham Forest, the way they're going after Man City, I don't understand how Chelsea fans can sit there and just think this is all 100% going to be okay and there's nothing to worry about here.
I mean, the one thing I'd say though, just before I actually say my opinion on it, Terry, didn't they say the same stuff last summer? Remember when they had to sell players by certain deadline and stuff like that? But didn't the same thing happen last year?
They certainly did. There was similar things being said, but not with this much vim. There was sort of loose elements of it, but they've spent lots more money. It's another year without Champions League football, and the problem that they may face. And people are, some of this is surmising, some of this is a hypothesis. But there's a lot of, the reason why I believe lots of clubs have not spent in January is because they've seen the punishments of Everton. They've seen the punishment now being handed down to, or the charges being handed down again to Everton and again to Forest. And their view is, we all lost more than 105 million, but we thought we'd be able to write this off and write that off. We thought we'd be able to make sure that this goes under a youth academy development, and this goes under here and this goes over there. Maybe the way people have been doing their accounting to write off these losses, the Premier League are no longer accepting. And it's the way everybody has just gone bang and stopped spending. That's the big red flag here. It's not a specific attack on Chelsea. But if you look at how much Chelsea has spent, and yes, it's been amortized over a long period of time, but they've still spent huge amounts of money. They still have previous players that have been sold now to pay off. That money still accumulates. And it's 2 years with no Champions League football, maybe 2 years with no European football. That is, without a shadow of a doubt, over 2 years, that's what, £150 million hole that you can't just replace. It's not as though they're new sponsors.
I hear what you're saying now. This obviously relates to the whole amortization became the buzzword of the year last year. I still remember everyone just learned the word amortization. They didn't realize Chelsea were amortizing their points in the Premier League instead of the actual money. But when it comes to this whole situation, listen, Chelsea, Man City, let's go. Premier League clubs, League Two. We're going to be watching League Two at least twice a year. The home game at Stamford Bridge and the home game at the Etihad. I can't wait for that game right there. Chelsea Football Club tried to skip the process. And this is the cons of skipping the process. This is the cons of doing it the right way. I've said this before 100 times. There is a right way of doing this. City fans always make this stupid argument that I've heard 100 times. Oh, how are clubs supposed to compete? How can they do this? How can they do that? You can always make it to the top. Brighton, Aston Villa, and Newcastle are an example of 3 clubs who can win the league in the next 3 years. In the next 3 years, they have a chance of winning the league if they spend money smartly, make a series of 3, 4, 5, 6 correct transfer decisions, have a manager who can win the league, and you can win the league. It's not a thing where you have to just lump money at it. And I think with Chelsea, it's essentially, it's not essentially, it actually is just skipping the process. Like, you watch the way Chelsea have done things over the last 2 years. It's essentially like we're basically going to buy 25 youngsters. And instead of us developing 3, 4, 5 youngsters at a time, we're just going to develop 20 of them. And because we're going to develop 20 youngsters at a time, it's a position where it's like, oh, it's now a bit crazier because of this whole amortization stuff. The one thing I will say, though, is, and I actually agree with you, and there's a reason why. Look, it's February 2nd. Terry has probably had, and I probably will speak for him, this is probably the deadest ever transfer window he's ever reported on, ever. It's actually, I don't think it's ever been this dead. The highlight of the transfer window is literally Timo Werner on loan to Tottenham Hotspur from Leipzig's bench. That's the highlight of the transfer window. And that, for me, tells you all you need to know. This transfer window has been absolutely dead. No one signed anyone. And I think what Terry just said, I actually agree with. I think the Everton and the Forest things, the Premier League is very smart. I think they're doing this on purpose. I think that the reason they charged or found Everton and Forest guilty first, so they can set a precedent. I feel like this is a dangerous precedent to set now, though, because it's in a position where it's like, yo, Chelsea, you're in trouble. City, you're in trouble. Whoever, if you're in trouble, you're in trouble. And that's the same reason why we spent probably the first 2-3 months of the season talking about how Arsenal need a striker in January, blah, blah, blah. And they ended up not being able to sign one because of FFP. So, I feel like this FFP thing now maybe is probably being implemented more strictly, I'd say. Maybe implementing the rules a bit more to the T, to the point type thing. I think only time will tell. But this was a position as well where Chelsea were in last summer. Now, clubs have to be smart because, as the guy said that we were just watching now, he said, look, the clubs know that Chelsea do have to sell. The clubs know that Chelsea do have to sell. So they might be in a position where they have to, just basically sell for a much cheaper price. Enzo Fernandez, I have an escape for you, my brother. It's time. It's time you actually play for a serious Champions League club. Enzo and McAllister, World Cup winners for Argentina. This time, Champions League winners for Liverpool. Let's do this. Cheeky £45 million bid. Enzo Fernandez, you could come to the right club in England now. Let's do this.
And this is why, I think this is why Chelsea fans have to take this seriously. Now, some elements of losses can be written off against the profit and sustainability rules. They can be, okay? But we know that they're becoming harder and harder to write things off. The Premier League is becoming a stickler for it. In the 2020-21, £156 million loss was made. But of course, a lot of that may have been allowed to be written off because of COVID. In the 2021 to 22, they posted a loss of 121 million in losses. Now, they normally, in around the end of March of every year, so March 2024, they will post the 2022-23 results. I can't fathom how they make a profit.
It's impossible.
Because of what they've spent in that time and not being in the Champions League. So I
even
can't
if they win
fathom...
the league, I don't think they make a profit.
So exactly. So you also look at this in the last 4 years, according to the Swiss Ramble, they've lost a hefty 343 million in totality over the last 3 years. Now, this is how it feels the Premier League are going. That certain elements that they've allowed you to write off in the past, they're no longer allowing people to write off under. So this is why Chelsea fans, I just don't think you can sit there like a bunch of, or a flock of ostriches, burying your head in the sand. You should be knocking on the front of your club's door saying, what the hell is going on? What the hell is happening? What direction are we going in here? What are we... Because if, as the experts are predicting, this is going to be looked at as deliberate breaches because you've just spent it on players. If you've spent money making your stadium bigger to generate a bigger income, as an example, you can look at that as you've inadvertently failed. What you've tried to do is spend money to make more money so that you're in a profit. But if you just seem to have spent loads of money to try and win and it hasn't worked, that means you're deliberately overspending with no guarantee, not guarantee, but the likelihood of you generating an even bigger income from that is still quite low when you look at the situation. So if it's believed that they deliberately did it, if they had a 10-point deduction last year, they'd have been relegated. If they were to get more than Everton, because they're saying it's bigger than Everton's, potentially, they get a 15
Weren't Chelsea snitching on themselves as well 3 months ago?
So that's a separate situation. If they got 10, if they got a 15 or a 20-point deduction this season, as an example, that would put them on, that would put them in the relegation zone. So Chelsea, I don't know. I understand how Chelsea fans are not asking more questions of their football club in this circumstance. I'm worried about this, and I'm not a Chelsea fan. I'm worried about it because I stand up for the clubs when it comes to them being mismanaged because of this very reason. Because of this very reason, that can put clubs out of business. Now, isn't it ironic though? Imagine it turns out that it's another loss and they're losing. Isn't it amazing that there's rules in place that will stop the owners, like this month just gone by, from spending even more, creating even more debts on the football club? Because if they weren't stopped, if there was no regulation in place to at least put a buffer up, say, whoa, slow down, where could this end up? Where's the end? How long is a piece of string? On top of that, there's the investigation that's currently going on, where they have reported themselves to the Premier League for multiple breaches, what they believe to be deliberate breaches to circumvent FFP and to circumvent profit and sustainability rules. Now, no one knows what they're going to find. The fact they've reported themselves is not a good look. But if you couple genuine breaches with the potential of financial mismanagement and corruption to the side of it, Chelsea could see themselves with a 20, 30, 40-point deduction, which, with the way they've played in the last 2 years, that's relegation. That is literally essentially you're being told you're relegated. If you look at the points totals of the last 2 years, and in any one of those seasons, take 20 points off, 30 points off, they're gone. They're out the Premier League. And then how do you get out of that financial hole? Because you've still got all the debt to pay. It's not like when you get charged, the debt gets written off. The debt's still there. You know, and Chelsea fans have got to wake up here and smell the coffee. Yes, this may not end up being as bad as it is, but you cannot sit back on your hands and pretend that it's all going to be okay. Your club's genuine future, your club's history, everything is at stake. And when it comes to the financial mismanagement of football clubs, we have seen this happen before. We've seen multiple clubs broken before. And maybe, just maybe, the Premier League now really tightening its grip and showing teeth is making clubs realize, you know what, even with the regulations, we've been breaking a lot of the rules, or we've been at least bending them as far as they can go before breaking. And the Premier League look like they're not having it anymore. That is how it appears. So if I was a Chelsea fan, I would not be sleeping easily. I'll be speaking to the official supporters clubs. I'll be speaking to the people that that can speak to directly, the Todd Bowleys and the Clear Lakes. They should be asking for full, frank explanations of what the plan is right now, because this could get a whole lot worse for Chelsea before things get better. And I don't even believe I'm being hyperbolic. I'm only looking at what the experts are saying. I'm only looking at their previous year's trading history, which is all fact. and what's happening to other clubs that are losing money. And when you couple in no one spending, like I said to Arsenal fans a few weeks ago, who said we're caked in money, we've got loads of money, it's a lie that we haven't. Why is no one spending? I think everybody's real. Even people that aren't in big debts are probably thinking, you know what? I've seen what Everton are not allowed
Probably
to write
like
off.
Liverpool ain't in big debt, but even we're thinking like, yo, we have to be careful here.
I think everybody is. I think Chelsea Chelsea are running a big risk here. Big risk.
I think if everything what you just said, but actually a lot like I didn't interject there because I was actually trying to understand the situation as you're explaining it. If everything you just said now comes into fruition, then Chelsea are in massive trouble. Like if what you just said is a thing, Chelsea could actually end up being relegated. Like this could actually be and here's the thing, probably from a Premier League perspective, and I know this sounds sad, but from the Premier League generating revenue perspective, I don't think they would do that because obviously Chelsea have a worldwide fan base that watch them around the world. Obviously, it's not the same with Everton. It's obviously not the same with Forest. It's much easier to kind of like, probably charge them teams because they don't have a worldwide fan base that wakes up in East Asia at like 3 a.m. in the morning to watch them. So I think that's probably one of them things. But look what you just said. Obviously puts Chelsea in a massive position of danger. Now, the Saudi League saved Chelsea last season with buying Koulibaly, with buying Mendy, blah, blah, blah. Now there are people actually leaving the Saudi League, which I don't even know what the Saudi League direction, they're trying to head in now is to begin with, because some people might not even continue in that league. Some people are saying, the project has already failed a year in. I don't think the project itself has failed. I think we'll see with time. But thing is, I saw someone say this earlier on as well. I don't know if it's true or not. Apparently they also have to sell homegrown players, or it's like something like that. So that's why he used the Gallagher example.
Yeah, so homegrown players again, and I spoke to I DM'd one of the experts about this, saying how is it that they're pure profit? And he just sent me a message back in relative layman terms. He said essentially, and this is where there's conjecture and there's challenge. So there is the possibility that a lot of these young players that Chelsea have purchased could theoretically come under academy investment or youth investment, and then so that they could write that part of the debt off. So for instance, say they spent £200 million on players,
loophole, basically.
Yeah, there could be a loophole out. However, there's a theory going around the experts that the Premier League is now being a lot harsher on this. However, someone like Conor Gallagher, someone like Broja, someone like Reece James, no matter what their expenditure is over say over a 3-year period, those 3 players in wages, new contract signing on fees, agent fees, bonuses have cost them £40 million. Theoretically, that £40 million theoretically could be written off of their losses
As academy,
because it's academy. Yeah, so that's the theory. So that's why they looked at it as pure profit. Because if you then sold them all for £100 million, that's £100 million of income, or £100 million into your business that you could essentially write off your losses, but none of their expenditure goes against you. So it doesn't actually impact it's not 100% profit on your actual trading accounts, but on what's considered a loss under profit and sustainability.
So theoretically, they could even claim Caicedo as a youngster, basically.
Theoretically, I doubt it, as he's played professional games for other clubs. So it all depends on who they've bought, what level they've played at, how many professional appearances they've had, how old they are when they come in. But this is the thing. I think that some people have been doing. Look, we all know that Chelsea and City, both of them, although they have had a few young players come through, typically in the last decade and a half, their academies have been to produce players to loan out and make money as income. That's what they've done that 2 summers ago. Exactly. That's what their academy was predominantly for. They're now trying to find a new way of raising money through young players without necessarily wanting to buy them. But I think that the governing bodies are being far stricter. And I think they're being far stricter because they want to show they've got teeth, so that when people cheat, potentially, like City may have, they can hit them with a huge fine. Because if breaching the rules is a big fine and a big punishment, cheating them can be even bigger. So I think it's all a knock-on effect from there. And as I say to Chelsea fans, look, you guys have just got to be knocking on the door of your football club, and you've got to be asking what's going on here. It's about.
I agree with you, specifically if there's a punishment. If there is a punishment that puts like Chelsea's position, or like their like, how can I say this? Their existence in the Premier League in danger, then something needs to be investigated, as you said. I actually agree with that. I don't think there's anything you said that's crazy or wild. I just think I'm looking at this current situation right now, probably from a Premier League perspective, it doesn't really benefit them if they relegate Chelsea at all, even from a monetary perspective. That's why they might hold back on that a little bit or hold back on the punishments. But what you just said regarding the loopholes, maybe that's something, Chelsea will do. Just look for a loophole, look for something like that where it's like under academy investment, perhaps, I think they do have enough. If we're being honest, they do have enough to probably sell 100 million before June. Like, Broya for 20, Gallagher
Yeah,
for 30. That alone
they
is
probably
50 million.
do.
They
This
could,
is they do, but this is where I think, again, say you want Gallagher and Chelsea have got to sell. I would wait until after the 30th of June. Why are any other Premier League club going to care about? I mean, if Chelsea get a deduction of points, right, they're still going to be in the same financial situation the day after. The day after the 30th of June, they're still going to have to raise money. So you're still going to be able to turn around and say, unless they're getting a big influx of money from elsewhere, say they've got a new sponsor landing that's worth £100 million up front, then maybe not. But you got to play it carefully. Premier League clubs, that's why they were trying to get £50 million for Broya. Then they wanted like huge loan fees, and it's all whittled itself right down to a smaller amount because clubs are saying, no, you're the ones that need to sell. We don't.
In the end.
It's crazy.